We begin today's show looking at how nearly 200 countries have agreed to protect biodiversity in the world's oceans. The historic United Nations High Seas Treaty is a legally binding pact that could help reverse marine biodiversity loss by addressing pollution, acidification, and overfishing. It was agreed to at a United Nations conference Saturday.
Good evening-ish, ladies and gentlemen. The ship has reached the shore.
The historic agreement caps nearly 2 decades of efforts by conservation groups and seeks to establish marine protected areas covering 30% of the world's seas by 2030 to protect ocean biodiversity. Environmentalists hailed the treaty's passage as a major milestone. Greenpeace's ocean campaigner Laura Meller called for the treaty to be ratified as quickly as possible to, quote, deliver the fully protected ocean sanctuaries our planet needs, she said. The International Union for the Conservation of Nature said its adoption, quote, closes essential gaps in international law and offers a framework for governments to work together to protect global ocean health, climate resilience, and the socioeconomic well-being and food security of billions of people. For more, we're joined by Minna Epps, a marine biologist and director of the ocean team at the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. She participated in the UN negotiations on the High Seas Treaty. She's joining us now from Geneva, Switzerland. Welcome to Democracy Now! It's great to have you with us, Minna Epps. Talk about the significance of this long negotiated treaty, what it does accomplish and what it doesn't.
So, hi, yes, good morning to you all, and I'm very pleased to be here. It is indeed a historical milestone, and it's certainly good news for all our ocean defenders out there. So I think it's been long overdue, as you said. So this treaty has been negotiated for the past 5 years, but as you said, been in discussion for a very long time. And I think that our climate, our world has changed quite a lot since. In terms of the importance of the ocean and its benefits and services has really increased on the public, but also political agenda. So I think that the momentum was really right. And if we wouldn't have agreed now, then it would have been, a part failure to kind of protect our ocean, which is so vital to us. So we are increasingly understanding the importance of the ocean in terms of climate change adaptation and mitigation, but also to protect biodiversity. And you alluded to the milestone commitment that was made by all states in Kunming, Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, adopted in December, which really sets out to protect 30%, not just of land and coastal areas, but of the ocean. And in order to achieve that, we cannot ignore 2/3 of the ocean, which is the high seas, the areas beyond national jurisdiction. So you mentioned that, we're able to establish marine protected area. So today there hasn't been, any kind of mechanism to establish or a legal framework to establish marine protected areas in the high seas. But this treaty actually sets out to do much more than that. It's really in general to conserve and sustainable use of marine biological diversity beyond national jurisdiction. So it really has been a package deal. It's been a long road, and I have to still compliment all the negotiators, especially the last 40-hour marathon that they went through in order to reach an agreement, which, as we know, multilateralism is being challenged at the moment. And the fact that they were able to reach an agreement, I think, was just so welcome, and it was incredible. So in terms of what this treaty can offer, it's basically a internationally legally binding treaty under the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea, which was established about 40 years ago. So this is really kind of looking to actively, conserve and ensure sustainable use. So it's about not just about establishing marine protected areas, but also to make sure that the ocean as a whole and human activity is managed. So we know what we need to do to protect or restore ocean health. We need to remove the threats, enhance recovery, and build resilience. And of course, one of the best ways to do that is really to invest in establishing a network of marine protected areas that can serve those multiple benefits. But it's also about being able to conduct environmental impact assessments to ensure that any human activity does not negatively harm the marine environment. But also the other part of the package relates to access and benefit sharing of marine genetic resources, as well as the capacity building needed for marine technology, transfer of marine technology. So that's kind of essential then. But of course, there's a lot of cross-cutting issues that needs to be resolved, whether in terms of dispute settlement, the financial mechanism, et cetera, et cetera. So we are really hopeful. The text just came out a few hours ago, so we will see what the final details are. But whatever it is, it's welcome, and we will have to work with that.
I wanted to turn to comments from one of the Russian delegates at the conference who criticized the negotiating process.
Given the limited time available, it is impossible to properly review the draft we have just received. Large parts of this text are very much new to our delegation and represent parts of deals in which our delegation did not have a chance to participate. We're not prepared to limit our further engagement to technical amendments and reserve our position broadly in this regard.
And this is a member of the Nicaraguan delegation.
Furthermore, we want to express our concern regarding the method of work employed that did not guarantee the equality, equity, the balance, and transparency during this process, with multiple parallel meetings, making it difficult for small delegations to participate, thus excluding some developing countries.
Minna Epps, if you could respond.
Okay, in terms of not having enough time, of course, time was not on their side, but I think that I think the president handled it quite well. She was very conscious of being inclusive and listened to various parts. And I believe that some of these issues that was brought up by the Russian delegation or introduced new proposal, the president did remind that a lot of this text the paragraphs have essentially stayed the same in the last few rounds of negotiations. So it wasn't new text per se, and it was basically very late hour to introduce new proposals, which a few countries did rather towards the end. And these were typically countries that have been quite quiet in previous round. And as we were getting closer to seal a deal, if you like, basically spoke up more vocally and was trying to introduce new language, which was basically too late in the day. There was some time stalling activities or basically taking the floor, and the president really wanted to move this forward. But I think everybody worked on the same premises in terms of having to review the text quite rapidly. I mean, at that stage, they had seen all the texts and there were still some changes, but they have been very familiar with the text. So I think that time was short for all the delegates, but they managed to come through. I would say that in terms of the Nicaraguan comment on basically being unfair, I think that there were several, particularly the small island development states, that yes, they have smaller delegation. And I think that, dividing it up to small groups, of course, it is a stretch if you have a smaller delegation. But I think that they were really trying to work constructively, having bilaterals, etc., so that, it could be accommodated.
Minna Epps,
so I think that
I wanted to go to some of the key points, like the agreement to share marine genetic resources. What does that mean?
Yes, it basically means that, both now or also looking at the future, there might be potential new discoveries, as you wish, in terms of mineral, and they could be monetary and non-benefit sharing, but it's basically how can you get access to these and also sharing the benefits, given that the high seas it's a common heritage of humankind, so it kind of belongs to all of us. So there was a lot of discussion and sticking points in terms of percentage or royalties and benefit sharing, and it really came down to equity, principles of equity, and I think that was the major sticking points of the negotiation towards the end was really what in terms of the global north and the global south divide in terms of equality and fair and equitable access and benefit sharing.
And requiring environmental checks on deep sea mining.
Yeah, so in terms with the seabed floor, it's actually managed by a different authority called the International Seabed Authority, which actually has a mandate to protect but also explore the deep sea. And there are now several, more than 30 exploration licenses pending that, well, they have been approved for exploration. It basically covers an area the size of Mongolia, and that could have very significant adverse environmental damage. So it's also, there was particular language in this treaty that would actually dictate, which presides over it. So make sure that you cannot, the International Seabed Authority cannot issue both exploitation licenses if it will hamper marine biodiversity in the high seas. So it's also how these two instruments will actually play out together. Because it's currently managed by a different authorization. So I think what we really wanted here is a strong high seas treaty that can actually treat and manage the whole governance of the ocean, as the legal framework have been quite fragmented. So the details.
Dr. Epps, I wanted to, since we have so little time, for you to talk about why the oceans are so important when it comes to dealing with the climate, covering more than 70% of the Earth's surface, absorbing 90% of the world's excess heat, and also address the amount of plastic in the world's oceans.
Yeah, so the ocean is under a major threat, and I think that we talk about plastic pollutions, et cetera, in the ocean. And a lot of things that happens at the high sea is basically out of sight and out of mind. But what has happened, what you were describing, is that, yes, the ocean have been providing these services as absorbing excessive CO2 emissions. But we don't want the ocean to continue to provide those kind of services. We need to cut emissions rapidly in order because we have tampered so much with the chemistry of the ocean that I don't think that general public or policymakers really realize the severe threat. And the UN Secretary General of the United Nations declared an ocean emergency last year. So it's absolutely crucial. And we think that protecting nature and the ocean is really our best ally to fight climate change and build that resilience, but also to help enhance recovery. But there is currently under negotiation which has just started in Uruguay, to have a global plastic treaty and a global treaty on plastic ban, which actually is being negotiated and hopefully can conclude faster than the High Seas Treaty, which will also have a very positive impact on our ocean to restore ocean health.
And what is the implementation of this treaty, and how long did it actually take to negotiate?
For the High Seas Treaty, it started in 2018, but actually before that, you will have preparatory comms meeting, and I think it was decided in 2015 to go forward and have official rounds of negotiations. And they set out 4 rounds, 2 weeks each, was the estimated time to conclude. Now, we didn't conclude in the 4th round, which was resumed after the global pandemic. And as we know, it was a pause of more than 2 years, almost 2.5 years, and the political climate had changed significantly, and we came back to a different world because we have to have in-person meeting when it comes to kind of international diplomacy. So I think that a lot of governments had changed for the worse, for the better, but I think that was some of the delays that it took time, that it wasn't possible just to come back once and conclude. And we really need to deliver on that promise of multilateralism. So I think that that's the reason why it took so long to agree. And of course, it is a challenge to have 193 countries agreeing But on the other hand, and nobody is going to come out of this treaty. I mean, everybody's going to be happy that a conclusion has been reached, but not everybody's going to be content of what is in the actual treaty. But of course, if somebody was 100% happy, that means that someone else another country or state will not be happy. So it really has been a compromise.